Hello, I am Nikki Going and I am recording this presentation on behalf of Enhanced Language Services or ELS. This presentation is on how to answer 10 of the most commonly asked questions on advertising. I hope that you enjoy the presentation and find it interesting and useful. Please note that all of the adverts used in this presentation are used under fair use for educational analysis and that all rights belong to the original copyright holders. It is worth your while to work on your technique for answering all comprehension and advertising questions, as most of your assessments in most of your subjects depend on your comprehension or understanding of written texts. These tips are based on 20 years of teaching, marking, and marking matric final examinations. Remember that the language exam includes 10 marks on advertising in either question 3 or 4 of the exam, and an advertisement is often used as the text B in the comprehension section, which is question 1 of the language exam. Questions on text B usually count for approximately 6 marks. This means that advertising can count for as much as 16 out of your 70 language exam marks, so it's definitely worth revising your technique when it comes to advertising. Also, the types of questions asked about advertising are also often asked elsewhere in both the language and literature examinations. Advertising questions test your comprehension, and they are contextual questions because the answers must always be based on the given text, the advertisement that appears in your assessment. And of course, you will know that you get questions based on visual texts in subjects like history and life sciences, so these are good skills. What follows are my top 10 tips for structuring your answers to advertising questions in particular and all comprehension questions in general. If you use these techniques when answering all questions that call for a written response of more than a few words, you could actually improve your marks in all of your subjects. Tip number 1, read the text very carefully before you read the questions. The reason that you do this is because of the way that the human brain works. We really struggle to turn off that part of our brain that is constantly searching for meaning. If you read the questions first, you will automatically try to work out what the comprehension passage text or advertisement is about, and that could result in you jumping to very, very wrong conclusions. This is particularly true of advertisements, which often set out to shock or surprise you and may be satirical, ironic, or a parody. So read the advertisement very carefully before reading and attempting the questions. Remember that most advertisements include visual and verbal information, and that you must pay attention to both. Think about what you can see, which is the visual information, and what you read, which is the verbal information. Note that if there is very small font or lettering in an advertisement, those words will appear in a text box next to the advertisement. The examiner might even be kind enough to explain difficult words to you in a glossary. Make sure that you read everything in the text boxes and in the glossary. Tip number 2. Before answering the question, identify keywords and work out where the marks will fall. For example, in the question, comment on the effectiveness of the slogan, for 2 marks, you will get 1 mark for identifying the slogan and 1 mark for explaining why it is effective, as long as you are specific about the effect that the slogan has on the reader. If you don't know what a slogan is, I suggest that you watch the YouTube video on advertising techniques, which is also on this YouTube channel. Tip number 3. Before answering the question, go back to the part of the text that you are told to refer to. This is why it is very important to read the whole question carefully. For example, if you're told to refer to a visual picture or image in an advertisement, and you answer by referring to the words or the text, you will not get any marks, even if what you've said is true. This is because you've not followed the instructions given in the question. This is also why you must know the technical terminology associated with advertising. If you don't know what a slogan, logo, or catchphrase in an advertisement is, you will struggle to talk about these aspects. Tip Number 4. Start your answer with specific words and be specific throughout your answer. Many learners lose out on marks, not because they don't know the answer to a question, but because they answer a question really, really badly. For example, if your response to a question is, "It is effective because it works really well," you will not get any marks. For a start, your marker will not know what it is or why it is effective, and "it works really well" is just an opinion, not an argument. Remember that you get 0 marks for opinions, and that opinions are statements that you have not proved to be true. This is why you must never start an answer with it, he, she, because, that, or if, or other similar terms. They are all vague. Instead, start with specific words and use specific words throughout. For example, in the answer, the slogan, "Reading is fundamental," is effective as it highlights the importance of reading and how future progress in life depends on good reading skills. The marker will know exactly what you are talking about. The slogan, "Reading is fundamental," and why you think it is effective. It highlights the importance of reading and how future progress in life depends on good reading skills. Remember that if your answer is well written, the marker will not have to go back to the question to work out what it is that you are talking about. A well-written answer makes sense on its own. Tip number 5. Use the key words from the question in your answer. You might have noticed that I did this in the previous answer. The question included the words slogan and effectiveness, and I included these words in my answer. This makes it clear to the marker that you are actually answering the question, and it helps you to stick to the question so that you do not write an irrelevant answer. Tip number 6. Answer in complete sentences. You do this in order to make sure that your meaning is clear. A complete sentence makes sense on its own. Notice that I said complete sentence, i.e. sentences that contain a subject and a finite verb and make sense on their own. I did not say long sentences. A mark of academic genius is to be able to explain difficult ideas in the shortest, most simple way. For example, Albert Einstein explained the relationship between space, time, and matter with only 6 symbols. E equals mc squared. No one expects you to be an Einstein-level genius at all times, but remember that your first duty as a writer is to communicate clearly. Tip number 7. Write 1 detailed point per mark, ideally 1 complete sentence per mark. If you're wondering how much you should write, this is the answer. For a 3-mark question, you should ideally write 3 sentences, where you make a different point in each sentence. Remember that you do not get marks for repetition. Also, remember to think about where the marks will fall. That was tip number 2. And make sure that you achieve each mark. It's a good idea to put a tick on your question paper as you write for each mark, so that you can be sure that you've answered the whole question and written to the mark allocation. There are few guarantees in life, but you can rely on 3 things: death, taxes, and if you write nothing, you get 0 marks. So even if you think your answer might be wrong, look at the part of the text that you're told to refer to and say something about it. Answer anyway. You will have a better chance of getting some marks than if you write nothing at all, because if you write nothing at all, you're guaranteed 0 marks. Tip number 8. Support your answer with evidence from the correct part of the text. English teachers are basically suspicious creatures, and if you don't prove what you're saying is true, we're unlikely to believe you. Also, you can only get marks for what you write down, so write it down, no matter how obvious it may seem, and say why you are saying what you are saying. Tip number 9. Reread and check your answer to make sure that your meaning is clear. Imagine that the person reading your answer is not your clever, highly trained English teacher. Imagine instead that your marker is a person who really struggles and is about 4 years younger than you. Your answer should be so well explained that this person would understand what you are saying. Tip number 10. Refer back to the question and check that you've answered the whole question for the whole mark allocation. Do a quick double check before you move on to the next question. Learners often get so excited about the first part of a question that they completely forget to answer the rest of the question. Remember, the key to success when answering comprehension contextual questions is think, then ink. Note that I am not teaching an entire advertising module in this presentation. If you struggle with the basic principles of advertising, please watch the advertising presentation on this channel before you try to answer these advertising questions. If you are ready to answer these questions, then I suggest that as you work through this slide and the other typical advertising questions that follow, you use this presentation to help you with your revision. Perhaps you should stop the presentation as you get to each slide, write down your model answer to the question, and then mark your answer using the comments that I make with each slide. So the first question, what is the purpose of these advertisements? And there's 2 advertisements there. Justify your response. So that implies you're going to get 2 marks for answering that question on the first advert and the second one. This type of question tests your understanding of the persuasive intent of the advertisement. For example, is it to sell, inform, or raise awareness? To answer this type of question, first identify what is being sold or promoted. Ask yourself, is it a product, a service, or is the advertisement trying to persuade you to do or believe something? Also, think about the target market. Remember that justify your response means give reasons from the text, which is the advertisement, that proves that what you are saying is true. You will get 1 mark for identifying the product and intention, and 1 mark for giving proof of what you are saying. For example, the advert on the left has the purpose of selling Sure deodorant. That's 1 mark. This can be seen from the picture of the product, the can of Sure deodorant in the bottom left-hand corner. That's 1 mark. Or you could have said it can be seen in the headline, which says that Sure does not leave white marks, unlike the white mark which the referee is spraying on the football pitch. That would be a mark. In the second advertisement, the purpose is to encourage people to report child abuse or endangerment when they know or suspect that it is occurring. That would be 1 mark. The reader knows this because the headline says that reporting is the right thing to do. That would be a mark. Or you could argue that they know this because the advert has the logo of the Child Protection Week of 2022 in the top left-hand corner. That would be a mark. Notice that in my answers, I have given full sentences and I've included keywords from the question. So I always included that little phrase, the purpose of this advert is. In both answers, I provided 1 complete point in 1 full sentence per mark. And I did give you some alternative options. Who is the target audience? Substantiate your answer for 3 marks. So to answer this question, think about the product or behavior and who it would most likely appeal to. Also, think about how the visual and textual aspects of the advert would appeal to a specific target market. Remember that the target audience is the people that the advertiser would like to read or see the advert, and they are logically usually the same people as the target market. Although with products that are directed at children, it might be slightly different. So parents would buy the product, but children might see the advert and then encourage their parents to buy the product. Substantiate means give evidence from the text to prove that what you are saying is true. In this advertisement, the target audience is adults. That's 1 mark. The adults would read the call to action, which is read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition, which is quite formal language which children would not relate to, which is 1 mark. Therefore, the advert is clearly addressed to adults who can read, which is 1 mark. You could also argue that the target audience and market is young children, 1 mark, because the picture depicts imaginary cartoon characters standing alongside adults and a figure flying through the air below a bunch of balloons, 1 mark. That imagery is too childish to appeal directly to adults, but it would appeal to children and it would encourage them to ask adults to read to them. Or you could argue it would appeal to adults who see the value in encouraging the development of a child's imagination by reading to them. Or you could argue that it would appeal to both children and adults. So any one of those three is going to get you your third mark, as long as your conclusion is logical. Finally, you could argue that the target audience, as I said, is both adults because they need to do the reading, and children because they need to encourage the adults to read to them. So notice that in order to get your mark for identifying the target audience, you need to explain why you are identifying that particular target audience. And as usual, you are going to get awarded 1 mark per well-argued point. And ideally, each point is in a separate sentence. Question 3. How do the visual and verbal elements support the message? This is for 3 marks. Notice that the question breaks down to asking for information about what you can see. For example, layout, imagery, color, and symbolism. That's 1 mark. That's your visual elements. It asks for information on what you can read. That's 1 mark. Those are the verbal elements. And then it asks about the message of the advertisement. That's 1 mark. So to achieve full marks, you must link all 3. And here goes for a model answer. The message of the advertisement is that if the reader buys a Happy Meal, they will be happy. That's 1 mark. This is supported by the headline of the advertisement. Happy Meals put a smile on everyone's face. That's 1 mark. And you could have referred to loads of other evidence as well. I've just given that particular one. And this is supported by the picture of the smiling clown, or the fact that the clown is holding the McDonald's golden arch of the McDonald's logo with a smile beneath it, which looks like a smiling face. That's 1 mark. So that is your third visual mark. You could add that this smiling face is an echo of the clown's smiling face, but you don't have to. So notice that whenever you are asked to talk about visual information, you must start by literally saying what you see, and then explaining what it means or implies. And learners often forget to say what they see, and when they do this, they throw away the easiest marks ever. And I think they do that because they think that marks can't possibly be that easy to get. Question 4. Comment on the effectiveness of the slogan for 2 marks. Remember that the slogan of an organization summarizes their values in a short, memorable phrase. Here the slogan is, reading is fundamental. That would get you 1 mark. And it is effective because the word fundamental means of critical importance, essential or crucial. And this is closely linked to the call to action, which is read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition. And the call to action highlights that reading is fundamental because children need ambition. That's 1 mark. Note that when you discuss the effectiveness of a slogan, you should evaluate things like the effectiveness of any play on words, the emotional appeal, and or how memorable the slogan is. Question 5. Identify and explain 1 persuasive technique used for 3 marks. Depending on the advertisement, there are hundreds of persuasive techniques that you could comment on, including the use of emotive language, repetition, celebrity endorsement, etc. In answering this question, you would receive 1 mark for identifying the persuasive technique with a quote or a description, if the technique is a visual one, and 2 marks for a detailed explanation of why and how the technique is effective for persuasion. A possible answer out of hundreds of possible answers would be, this advertisement uses the persuasive technique of an appeal to celebrity, as the image depicts professional football players standing around a football referee as he sprays a white mark onto the football field. That's 2 marks. 1 mark for the persuasive technique, 1 mark for the explanation of where that's seen. The implication is that these professional footballers use Sure deodorant because there are some cans that they use where they do not want white marks to show, namely their deodorant. So that's your 3rd mark. You could have also said, this is reinforced by the headline of the advertisement. Some cans leave white marks, sure doesn't. That's 1 mark. You could have also commented that the use of contrast takes the reader by surprise and it's used as a persuasive technique. That's 1 mark. And then you would argue that the professional footballers want the white mark on the field to show, because the referee is spraying it to show the players where the ball should be placed and also where they should stand in order not to be offsides, for 1 mark. But in contrast, they want their Sure spray-on deodorant to be invisible and not leave white marks on their clothes, for 1 mark. And please note, you might have thought of another persuasive technique entirely. As long as you can clearly identify it, for 1 mark, and then make 2 points explaining the persuasive effect, you would get your 3 marks. Question 6. How does the language used appeal to the reader, for 3 marks? So obviously you need to make 3 detailed points. To answer this sort of question, you need to identify the target market, for 1 mark, and then comment on the extent to which the language is suited to them. Notice that you are not going to say anything about the picture or the visual techniques, because you are asked for information about the language, which is verbal. It's what you can read. You would quote and explain how 2 different aspects of language would be effective. You could discuss aspects of language like tone, register, and rhetorical devices, and you would need to make 2 well-supported points in order to be awarded your second 2 marks. A possible answer could be, the target market of this advertisement is South Africans who enjoy hot food. That's 1 mark. The language used is a mixture of isiXhosa, Eish, and Afrikaans, Komno, and only South Africans would understand that reference. 1 mark. The use of sexual innuendo in the body copy, when the lights go out you can still enjoy a saucy night in, is a humorous play on words, because the advertiser is actually referring to staying home and eating food with spicy peri-peri sauce on it, not having a romantic relationship, when there are power failures and load shedding. And this would also appeal to a South African target market, as South Africans tend to appreciate jokes about hardships like load shedding and power failures. And also, there are very few other nations that have experienced as many power failures as South Africans have. So they wouldn't know what that reference was to. So that's 1 mark. Remember that innuendo is language that hints at but does not explicitly state a reference to sex or something that is potentially insulting, embarrassing, or inappropriate. And it can be an effective technique to capture the audience or reader's attention, but it can also put the audience off the brand being advertised if their response is to be offended rather than finding the language witty or funny. So you could, in this question, argue that in fact that this language wouldn't appeal to the reader because it contains some sexual innuendo, and that might actually put some readers off. And they might also find the use of dialect a little bit too informal and therefore disrespectful. Is this advertisement biased or objective? Justify your answer, for 3 marks. Note that this kind of question also sometimes comes up in question 1 of the language paper. So you need to know what biased versus objective language is. Also note that this is a 3-mark question, and it encourages critical thinking about manipulation and credibility. Remember, credibility means the degree to which something is believable, and to justify means to give evidence from the text to support what you are saying, because here you are asked to justify your answer. So to do that, you need to look for examples of language and or images that are either very factual, which is objective or denotative, or very opinion-based and emotive, which is subjective, connotative, and biased, in order to support what you're saying. Remember that you will never ever get a mark just for saying that language is biased or objective. You don't get marks for opinions. You only get marks for arguments, which are opinions that have evidence to back them up. So you must make at least 3 points in which you explain why the advertiser is either biased or objective, because they're opposites, and you must analyze the text in detail. Remember to read through all of the text boxes where the really small font has been rewritten in full. Here the information is given on the right. And a possible answer could be, the use of statistics in the infographic implies that this advertisement is objective and based on facts, particularly as a survey by a reputable sounding institute, the Peterson Institute for Economics, is quoted for 1 mark. And this implies that and also because the research is based on a large sample that covers a wide area, namely 21,980 firms in 91 countries, we tend to trust that research. That's another mark. However, the catch line, hire more women in leadership roles, we're all worth it, sounds far more biased and subjective, especially as it is a statement made by a company that makes a lot of revenue from a target market that consists largely of women. So it's in L'Oreal's best interests to flatter women or show them in a positive light. Or you could argue this is a sweeping generalization that says that all women are worth hiring. And it seems quite likely that there might be some women out there who wouldn't be good hires and who wouldn't lead a company to have increased profitability for 1 mark. So note you can argue either way as long as you can prove your answer. Just be very careful not to contradict yourself. So don't argue that this is biased and opinion-based, but say that it is objective and factual, or the other way around. Note that your marks will depend on a detailed analysis and on logical argument where you don't contradict yourself. What emotions does the advert evoke? Give reasons for your answer. Note that this is a 2-mark question. When answering this question, you can refer to visual elements, which is what you see, or verbal/textual elements, which is what you read, because the question didn't specify which type of information you should provide. Answers about emotions will often refer to the use of color, facial expressions, or setting, which is all visual information. You could also think about the tone of the words used and the mood created by the visuals. Note that you're never going to get a mark for just listing emotions. So here goes with a sample answer. Note that there are lots of examples, so the answer that I give here is not the only correct option or options. The advertisement evokes emotions of happiness or fun or joy or a desire to experience these emotions. That would be 1 mark, one of those things. This is reinforced by the repetition of the words with happy connotations, such as smile and happy, 1 mark, or by the smiling clown, that would be a mark, or by the fact that the clown is holding a smile in the air, another mark, or by the use of warm and cheerful yellows and red that dominate the advertisement and have connotations of joy and happiness, yet another mark. Again, did you notice that when I talked about visual information, I started with describing what I saw. I literally said what colors were used in the advertisement. And then I explained what that means or implies. I talked about the connotations of the warm colors. Remember, you must always do this. Often learners forget to say what they see, and then they're losing some of the easiest marks that are available to them in all of the matric exams. Do you think this advert is successful? Give reasons for your answer. This is a 3-mark question. Note that you will never get marks for just saying yes or no or I like it, followed by something very personal. You don't get marks for opinions. This question invites personal judgment, but it must be backed by textual evidence. Your marks will lie in giving 2 reasons for your opinion that are based on the text. You need to say what the purpose of the advertisement is and give 2 reasons for your answer that are based on the text, and to say why and how the advertisement actually achieved its purpose. So the purpose of the advertisement is to persuade people to report child abuse or instances where children need protection. That's 1 mark. You could argue that this advertisement is not particularly successful because the child in the picture looks happy, healthy, and not particularly like he's in need of protection. That's 1 mark. Or you could argue that it's not clear what the reporting should be focused on, whether it is the fact that the child is not in school, that the child is sitting outside on his own, or that the child is endangered in some other not very obvious way. Alternatively, you could argue that the advert is successful because the boy looks vulnerable outside on his own, and this therefore encourages the reader to report anything that might endanger him, which makes the reader feel sympathetic towards the boy, for 1 mark. And because the advertisement appeals to the reader's desire to behave in a moral way and do the right thing with the emotive headline, "Reporting is the right thing to do," for 1 mark. Again, notice that when I discussed visual aspects of the advertisement, I started by describing what I saw, and then I talked about the implications. And also notice that I've given different possible answers to this question. I've argued that the advert is successful, and I've argued that the advert is not successful. Those are alternative answers. They could both get full marks because they both give logical reasons based on a detailed analysis of the advert for my opinion. And you could also come up with other reasons for your own opinion. But just remember that simply giving an opinion is not going to get you marks. You need to show how you can back your opinion by analyzing the text in detail. Explain the effectiveness of the play on words in the headline of this advertisement for 3 marks. This is a 3-mark question. So note, whenever there is a play on words question, you must remember that you must explain at least 2 relevant meanings, which will be 2 of your marks, and then why the play on words is effective. Explain the effect of that play on words for your 3rd mark. And remember, you will never get a mark just for saying it's effective. You need to explain why and how it's effective. So here goes. In this advert, the headline, "This is an ad for men," makes the reader surprised and curious. There's 1 mark. And it's therefore effective at capturing their attention and maintaining their interest, because the picture shows 4 lipsticks and the advertiser is a makeup and beauty products company, L'Oreal, and therefore it seems like an advert where women would be the target market. 2nd mark. The clever play on words and the actual meaning of the headline becomes clear on closer analysis of the lipsticks, which form an infographic showing how profitability of companies improves when women are hired. Therefore, the advert calls on men to hire women, for 1 mark. I've included a list of all the vocabulary used in the general advertising presentation, which is also on this YouTube channel, as well as the vocabulary that was used in this presentation. If you make sure that you understand what all of these words mean and you're able to use all of these words, you will be well equipped to handle the whole language examination, not just the advertising section. Many of these terms are also useful for the literature paper. As I read the list, make a note of any words that you can't remember the definition of, and then go back to the general advertising presentation to find out what the words mean, or just look the meaning up. Better still, think of an example in an advert where the technique is actually used. So I'm just going to read the list so that you know how these words are pronounced. Useful vocabulary: irony, satire and parody, message and purpose, visual versus verbal information, tone and mood, point and angle of view, subject, composition and setting, emphasis, balance and contrast, juxtapose and juxtaposition, symbol and symbolism, warm colors and cool colors, connotations, which are similar to subjective language, which implies bias, versus denotations, which is similar to objective language, which is factual language, diction, such as slang, dialect, idiomatic language, colloquial language, witty language, or innuendo, target market and audience, headline, catchphrase, logo, slogan, moods of the verb, imperative, indicative, interrogative, or subjunctive, parallel sentences and sentence fragments, credibility. Thank you. I hope that you enjoyed this presentation and found it useful. I've created this channel so that any learner or teacher who is working with the South African NSC curriculum can have access to detailed teaching and learning materials. If you would like to support me in producing these videos, please like and subscribe and pass the link on to any of your friends who would find it useful. Please note that advertising is applicable to grade 10s, 11s, and matrics. You are also welcome to make a small donation to support this work. To do so, please use the PayFast link in the channel description. Thank you and goodbye.